All right, thank you for staying with the Monday Report. Let's start the discussion right now on COP28, the progress so far in relation to the Africa Climate Summit. And joining me from Dubai is George Tarus, is the Acting Conservation Secretary, State Department of Forestry. Thank you for making time. And back in studio from my father's right, Jennifer Kaberi, founder and CEO of Mtoto News. Thank you for making time. Tobias Bele, Communication and Knowledge Management Lead, KCIC, that is the Kenya Climate Innovation Center. Asante sana for making time. And Masi Kimalat, CEO, Association of Startup and SMEs Enablers of Kenya, that is ASEC. Thank you so much for making time. And Tarus, I'll start with you on this. What are the key highlights so far at the COP28? I know you're there now. Are we making any progress?
Thank you very much, Trevor.
Yes, go ahead, Tarus. Are we making any progress there now?
Yeah, thank you very much, Trevor. Yes, there are quite a number of significant milestones we are making. I want to report that there are still quite a number of discussions going on up to now. Of course, in terms of the structure and the delivery of critical decisions, we are at very early stages, but so far, from the look of things, we are making some good headways. More so in the background of what happened in SCS in Nairobi. Right.
What would you say are some of the key highlights, Tarus, this far? Because it's entering week 2 now.
Trevor, maybe before going into that, it's good to contextualize processes around any sitting that happens on a yearly basis, more or less at 5 critical sessions that are happening, more so on those parties that subscribe to the UNFCCC. There are parties that subscribe to the Kyoto Protocol, the Paris Agreement, and many other instruments that have been established to ensure that the two critical frameworks for managing climate change is achieved. So in terms of how this conference normally happen, it's preceded mostly by a largely coordination meeting, because for negotiation to happen, you need to do a lot of consensus building, and these consensus have more or less been coalesced around blocks. So the first week of this meeting, which was 24th to 29th, it was more or less of in-house processes to ensure that Africa, for instance, were able to speak in one voice, the Latin America, and many other groupings that are participating in this conference. Thereafter, it's normally followed up by a high-level session, which was starting from 30th all the way to 2nd. And the idea is for the global leaders, mostly excellencies of countries, to set the tone and be able to provide actually some sense of direction to the negotiating team, who actually, in essence, began their work yesterday to think through around 7 thematic areas that this particular COP is considering. For the first time, we're having a global discussion around issues to do with health, for instance, and climate change, issues to do with finances, energy, issues to do with youth, and more so agriculture and food systems. So I would say, in terms of the real issues that are to be decided on next week, on 12th or 11th there, the proper work began yesterday, and so far from the tone of our leaders globally, there is hope across all those sectors, but I would say, Trevor, it's too early to place a call on how it will end up by the end of next week.
All right, thanks, Tarus. Let me come back to studio. And Jennifer, I'll start with you. I know you've been following the COP28 talks. Are you happy with the progress so far, or is it more and less of the same thing? Talking show.
Okay. You're putting me in a very difficult corner. One, I'm happy for one thing, the health day yesterday. The fact that they were able to negotiate and get some few $1 million into health, and most of the money is targeting children and African children. For me, I'm happy about that. At least with the NTDs, that the 50 million from child CIF is going to support children and reduce the diseases that can be eradicated, that have not been eradicated, and this as a result of climate change. In terms of talk shop, I have my thoughts about that, and these are my thoughts, because I feel sometimes we go there to feel good about ourselves, okay, and we're not talking. Where is the Mama Mboga, or where is Gov't, who is being flooded right now? and was not going to be able to do school, or was not able to sit for KCSE, okay? So I think we need to move from going to having a very elitist delegation to bringing people who climate change is affecting. And for me, I'm very passionate about children. So because in Kenya, for instance, over 50% of the populations are children who are being flooded right now, whose schools are being washed off right now, whose livelihoods are being washed right now. But have we heard their voices in COP28? How many children are among the delegation that went to COP28? Kenyan children. So that for me, it will be, and not Nairobi children. I'm talking about children in Turkana, Garissa, Kwale, Homa Bay, okay? I'm talking about those children who actually being affected by this. So we need to stop talking here and we go to the ground. You know, as they say, vitu kwa ground is different. Let's listen to them. And then maybe, just maybe, we may see some change. And it's a good thing we have someone, Tarus. One of the things that I would love to see the Kenyan government push is paragraph 45 of the ACS declaration. It was very clear, and it was on children, okay, and involvement of children. I'm going to emphasize on children because we have overdone youth, sorry. We have overdone youth, but you have not listened to children. And ACS, African Union, the Kenyan government, and many member states, they committed to include children in the conversation. Are they being included right now? If I go to the Kenyan pavilion in Dubai, are there children there? If I go and I listen, are there going to be children speaking there? Okay. So that is my challenge.
All right.
Thank you.
Tobias, are you happy with the progress so far?
As Tarus mentioned, we've just done with the first week. We are getting into the second week, and really the larger declarations and commitments will come when it gets to 12. But so far, so good. I would say that I am impressed by the progress made so far. Okay. At this particular COP. I think there has been a deliberate attempt at ensuring that all voices are captured. And as she has mentioned, and Tarus has clearly put it, for the first time we have a climate health agenda at a COP for the first time. And this was something that was endorsed by 123 countries, and already around 2.7 billion committed to that effect. And I think that's a move in the right direction. Because when you look at the effects of climate change, like extreme weather changes, the heat waves and the drought and all that, they have an impact on health. And overall, even though we still wait for commitments from other countries and stakeholders, in the first 4 days of COP, around 57 billion has been mobilized towards climate finance and towards different interventions. We have seen on day one, loss and damage fund being operationalized, and around 725 million USD being committed to that effect. There are still some discussions on the structures of that particular fund and how it will be implemented, but it is a move in the right direction. So I wait for the coming days to see how the talks progress, how different parties cohesively come together to really live to the theme of this COP, the slogan of this COP, which is to unite and take action. So for now, I would say that we are moving in the right direction. Okay. But there's still so much room for improvement.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mercy, are you happy with the progress?
From my end, it seems that it's a build-up, right? From COP27, now diversifying into the different sector themes, right? So introducing 4 new sectors to talk about, which is very important. Food security and food systems is a key thing that even us as a country we're even suffering from. So that introduction of diverse sectors is a big plus. The only challenge that we always foresee, and it's something that we've been championing as ASEC, is how do we ensure the voice of the startup ecosystem is also being included. So one of the key narratives is about having a unified voice towards climate action. But it's important to recognize the key players that are really steering this direction forward in a progressive manner, and that's the startups. They are the ones who are coming up with these innovative business models to solve climate change and even providing products and services that really cater to the rural and peri-urban communities, and even bringing down like affordable services down to these marginalized communities. But where is their voice in this global discussion? Because even if you look at the last week's concluded Kenya Innovation Week, His Excellency mentioned that innovation is a cross-cutting theme across all the different government interventions. But globally, how then are we able to bring even our own local solutions, which Kenya has developed, to that global arena? And I think those are case studies and models that need to be discussed at that global level, because startups really play a very key role in creating not only innovative solutions, but they actually provide the right type and affordable solution that these different countries could actually adopt within their own agenda.
Yeah.
And finally, looking at how, and I know it's still early, like what you mentioned, is really discussing how to operationalize it. Because we have so many protocols that have been developed over the time, right? Like Bwana Tarus has mentioned. But where is the outputs? Where's the traction? Can we actually say from COP27, this is actually what we have done and seen moving forward? Not only increasing the kitty for funding, but actually saying the actual impact on the ground and using that as a discussion and a case study in the ongoing thematic discussions at COP.
Let me bring back Tarus on this. And Tarus, there seems to be a concern about representation. How well represented are we as a country where you are right now in Dubai?
Thank you, Trevor. I didn't get your question very clearly.
How well are we represented right now? Because there's a concern in terms of the diversity of voices that are there in COP28.
Yeah, thank you very much, Trevor. From where I'm seated, the team that is been constituted to be able to participate in this COP have all the requisite capacities and expertise to be able to deliver what the country needs. Like I rightly say, the COP processes started way back in 1992, and Kenya has been a member since 1994. And over the years, of course, the art of negotiation is also a skill that requires patience. It requires a situation of give and take, and more or less consensus building. So the specific teams that have been set up to be able to follow the 7 thematic areas, in my view, are very capable experts drawn from those specific lines. And we are hopeful that by the end of next week, we should be able to have informed a document that is globally acceptable, but also on board our ideas. You must realize that COP is more or less a coalition of the willing, and more so enabling all of us to see things from the same lens and be able to agree on quite a number of thematic issues. Sometimes it's not easy. Like I mentioned, there's already certain elements of negotiation that are still ongoing up to now. They sometimes go up to late in the night. And so the teams that follow through actually, in my considered opinion, are putting in quite a number of efforts to ensure that partly what we need as a country is captured and well documented, involving, of course, quite a number of other background studies and pieces of information in terms of policies and many others. Thank you.
Yeah, Tarus, the president mentioned that we have secured an investment of about 680 billion green investments worth, but it is just pledges as at now. What will it take for the pledges to be fulfilled, based on what you're hearing there?
I lost you, but of course, His Excellency, the President, has been leading from the front all the way from when we hosted the CS, and our position as a country, and of course Africa in general, is that we need action, and we need actions that are backed up by predictable finances. And if you even look at the para 63 or 61 there, much of what was agreed in SCS is that we need to have serious investment in certain sectors if Africa, and Kenya by extension, is to be able to live through the challenges of climate change. So like I said, part of what was happening at the high leaders level is ideally now following through some of those discussions and be able to pitch opposition certain investment opportunities. And what His Excellency the President announced is so far what has been pledged by our partners across the spectrum. And we are hopeful that by the end of this negotiation, when at around 12th, we should be able really to have a figure that we could say this is what we came home with. But so far, I am convinced that we've done well. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Tarus. Let me bring back Jennifer into this conversation. Jennifer, you mentioned that the children are somehow sidelined. And I know you've been dealing with the children all the time. What are they telling you? What is their main concern, and how would they want to be involved, or how do you think they're best involved?
So children say the world as it is, they're the ones who are going to live here longer than all of us, okay? So they need a piece of the game. They need to be in the game to be able to contribute to this conversation, okay? Because in reality, they're the ones who, whatever is happening is going to affect them. And for example, I'll start with the climate financing, the 680 billion. How is that money going to be used? And what the children said in ACS, it is documented somewhere in government. The children asked, involve us in deciding how this money is going to be used, okay? Help a child in Kajiado who is in the verge of getting married because the parents need more cows because their cows died in the last drought, okay? Help a child in Turkana whose school has been flooded and they're being forced to go out of school to go and do some job, okay? Help, we want to be part of the solution. That's what the children are saying. Don't pity us, don't try to get into our shoes. Your feet are too big. Actually, that's what they said. Our feet are small. We are the ones who know how it pinches. Help put us in the center of this conversation of climate change, because it affects us much more. Okay, if you allow me, can I read?
Sure. And as you read through that, I'm wondering how best to involve them, because, you know, even if, would you do it physically, like take the children to COP28, or do we have someone to speak on their behalf? How best can we involve children?
Actually,
because the conversations there are quite technical.
And that's one of the reasons. They're too technical. It's affecting them. Why this big English, I'll call it, because I don't have Kizungu kubwa, Kizungu mingi, simplify the jargon into in a language that they can be able to understand, so that they can be able to contribute. I work with children. That's my 8 to 8, like my 24-hour job, because they have solutions. If they're able to understand how it's affecting them, they'll come up with solutions. I work with amazing children. One of the children, when we were preparing for African Climate Summit, and we had one of the experts come and speak to the children, and he spoke, and they said, Miss Jenny, that's what they call me, how can we make this information accessible to children all over Kenya? And they said, can we do a game board, like a simple game board, demystifying this big language? What is adaptation? Okay, what is mitigation? What this big language, can we simplify it into languages that we can be able to understand, so that you can be able to contribute, okay, to these conversations? And then, like ACS, right now we are working with one of our partners to be able to simplify the declaration for both the big, we're calling the big and the small. The big summit, that was for the oldest, into a language that they can be able to understand. But also we have already simplified the ACS, the children one, into language that they can, so that can be able to contribute. Do we want them to go to Dubai? Yes. Okay. Because you cannot, it's out of sight, out of mind. So if leaders see children and they're able to have a conversation, and they hear from the mouth of children how climate change is affecting them, they are more likely to make a decision than me sitting here saying climate change is affecting children. If we had a child here speaking what I'm speaking, it would have more impact than me speaking on behalf. Yes, we want a bigger delegation of children. I'm hoping in COP29 we are going to have a bigger delegation of children speaking for themselves. Okay, the same way we had at ACS, a bigger delegation of children speaking for themselves, because it is much more powerful coming from children.
All right.
Yes, thank you.
You wanted to read something?
Yes, let me read. I'm reading the ACS, the children ACS. I'm just going to read on climate financing, because I've seen the 680. They say this, people issue, people and companies that pollute the environment, which affect our rights and health and safer environment as children, are not punished, and they are not doing much to fix the problems. So they recommended the public, including children, should be hold the government accountable, government leaders and those most responsible for polluting the environment, including companies, accountable of their actions.
Okay.
Such companies should be denied finances, okay, so that they can be held accountable. Government should put in place Climate Financing Act. This came from children. African leaders, those ones at COP28, this is for you. African leaders should demand compensation from leaders from other parts of the world, especially those from the West, because their countries have done a lot of damage to the world.
Okay.
So this is coming from children. Can we be able to start implementing what the children say during the African Climate Summit?
All right, let me bring in Tobias on this. So, Tobias, you mentioned something about climate financing and saying that we need declarations that ensure that all voices are captured. How do we place ourselves at a vantage point to be the biggest beneficiaries of the climate financing? And should that even be the aim, or should we be focusing on self-sufficiency so that in the event that something happens, we can take care of ourselves and we're not looking for financing?
Okay, thank you, Trevor. Now, as a country, how do we put ourselves at a vantage point and to ensure that we attract some of this climate financing and all that? My response to that would be Kenya. Right now, the president chairs the African Committee on Matters Climate Change, and he has been at the forefront of pushing for a multilateral approach. It's one of the reasons why we had the ACS and a joint voice as a continent on matters climate change. And that, from my perspective, means that we are moving in the right direction. Should we be looking at, self-sufficiency and all that? The thing with the climate action and the climate change conversation, no one can go it alone. If one country does the right thing and the next country does the wrong thing, the net impact is we both lose. So it's really about pulling our resources together. And that's why we're having the COP. It's about these different stakeholders negotiating and agreeing on a unified course of action. So I would say we push for a more multilateral approach, because that way we are able to accomplish much more than when we just go it alone. But to also weigh in on what she was saying about making sure that all voices are captured and that all these diverse demographics are captured in the conversation, it is important, and particularly ensuring that we don't just talk about the technical terms, but we bring the people's faces to this conversation. And I'm glad that initiatives like, End Malaria are now trying to bring people's faces to the climate conversation, which is a move in the right direction. But in terms of a unified approach as a country, I think a multilateral approach is the best way to go. But I also believe that Kenya is already leading that conversation in the continent.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Mercy, let me bring in back on this conversation. So right now we know there's a green investment of 680 billion shillings that has been pledged from the COP28. One of the biggest challenges for any business has always been the cost of production. Should this money be pumped into the economy, because we know it will come in form of business investment? Wouldn't this run your people out of town, the SMEs? Because then, whichever establishment is put up, they have the advantage of having a lower cost of production. Therefore, whatever product they give into the market will be significantly lower than the current one that your SMEs are currently giving. Will it create an unfair competition environment, or are they welcoming these initiatives?
Well, it just goes back to the reason even why we even formed ASEC. If I just go back to why we even have like a case study for the association. If you look at the work that we do as ASEC, is that we bring together all these different entrepreneur support organizations that are walking the journey with the entrepreneur, right? From conceptualizing the idea, going to prototyping the solution in the market, looking at commercialization of the solution, and then also looking at helping them establish a market and actually grow. Now, with all this kind of like the life cycle of a business, the Entrepreneur Support Organization provides expertise in doing that. If you look at Kenya, we didn't start the green transition yesterday. It's something that we've been doing over time because of the huge effects of climate change that we've really been suffering from. If you look at even how Kenya has evolved over time, we're becoming more of a desertification country than even 10 years ago, right? Because looking at studies that Carlo has produced. And with that, there's a lot of innovations that have come out trying to mitigate climate. So you're looking at clean cooking stoves, you're looking at briquettes, production, and you're also looking at like different varieties of technology to support these entrepreneurs. An example is if you look at Mkopa, they came up with a pay-as-you-go solution to ensure that people in the rural and peri-urban areas are able to access energy at an affordable cost and when they need it. But now, as time has evolved, you're seeing that businesses now are suffering even more adverse effects of climate change because, again, going back to the lack of enough resources for them now to continue producing that product and service. And that's why now the discussion has shifted from climate mitigation, where we're trying to reduce decarbonization, to now climate adaptation. How are we thinking about building a business that is resilient and also has a sustainable pathway for either environmental sustainability or economic sustainability? Now, bringing back to the discussion on green investment, there are already companies that are doing green innovations. They're already producing products and services or even advisory to support entrepreneurs, SMEs and startups to have that embedded already in their business model. Now, when the funding does come in, whenever it will come in, it will actually help accelerate that because now we'll have access to local capital to now help these SMEs and startups to grow. Now, alongside that, we're also creating an opportunity to birth new economic models. So, for example, if you're only doing briquettes, now you can diversify. You can now do solar, you can do many other things along that value chain, which now increases your bottom line, meaning the more profitable you are, you have a chance of, one, creating more jobs. And that right now also is a crisis that we're seeing because with climate change now, what happens is the business goes down and then you cannot employ more people. Yeah. But with this kind of funding, we're able to catalyze the growth of these green innovations to now create more jobs, at the same time solving the climate change. Now, on the other end, when we have the traditional businesses, we create an opportunity to actually help them embed these green principles within their systems and processes, looking at how they target their customer and even also how they communicate about their brand to the customers to build that trust. And alongside that journey, the ASEC members will come in. These are the incubators, accelerators, or the mentors and the coaches to support these traditional businesses transition into being a green company or embedding green principles within there. Okay. So we're talking about how you can build a governance structure that can now help you ensure that how you source your product, how you produce, how you go to market, even how you trade with other partners is ensuring that you meet that green transition. Okay. So there's a lot of opportunity there for that. And even us as ASEC, we do not want to ensure that every entrepreneur, not only the ones based in Nairobi or the capital city, but even those who are in Homa Bay, those ones in Lamu, they have access to these community spaces where they can actually develop the solution or enhance their model to ensure that they can access that financing. All right, I'll take a quick break here. When you come back, my guests are still with me. And we'd like to hear your thoughts as well at Trevor Mbija at Citizen TV Kenya. Use the hashtag Monday Report. We're back in just a bit.